Hello and welcome to Cryptids of Russia. A few months ago I posted a video about Australian cryptids and thought an interesting place that this sort of phenomenon is rarely talked about is Russia. Within this topic there are plenty of Bigfoot-like creatures that have been reported, as well as a surprisingly large amount of lake monsters encountered. As usual, I'm avoiding most Bigfoot cryptids in this video, but do have one to share that isn't quite a Sasquatch, but its story is interesting nonetheless. Be sure to stay through the whole video as I have a semi-recent story to share that I think you may find interesting in dealing with another well-known cryptid in Ukraine. Lake Devil. Starting off, we get into a bit of an interesting territory, as the stories behind this cryptid have scientists struggling to find an answer, as well as most of the tales predate those of its more famous relative, Nessie. Lake Labankier is approximately 173 feet deep, with its deepest being 263 feet, and has the odd occurrence of the water not completely freezing over, even in the harshest of Siberian weather. This lake has also held claims to some suspecting that UFOs have an underwater base in its depths. For years, stories of an aquatic creature that would upturn boats and attack people were told by the locals. In 1953, a geologist by the name of Viktor Tverdoklubov led a team to research the area, where he saw what he described as a creature like an orca swimming near the surface. In 2012, an associate professor in biogeography from Moscow State University, named Ludmila Emelianova, claimed to have found something odd while she was using a sonar device. She claimed she found something that was extremely large and was not a school fish. A few years after this, the Russian Geographical Society claimed to have found a jawbone and skeleton of an animal that closely resembled what people had been describing. However, I must note that apparently they decided not to bring this evidence to the surface with them. Descriptions of the creature claims it can walk on land even though it has flippers, as has been seen eating foliage. It has a small head and a long neck and a huge body. According to estimates, it is said to possibly reach lengths of up to 26 feet long. One thing that I would like to mention is that, like many theories about Loch Ness, many think that Lake Labankier has underwater tunnels that connect it to the outside ocean. This leads many to believe that the creature can roam outside of the lake at periods of time. Yeti. Recently, I accidentally began live streaming on my channel, but it turned into quite a fun time. During the conversation, the topic of Bigfoot came up and was asked about the Yeti. While I'm fairly dead set in leaving Bigfoot topics to others, I didn't feel right talking about Russian cryptids without at least mentioning the Yeti. As many of you are aware, this cryptid is basically the Bigfoot that likes the colder climates. Rather than having the characteristic brown fur, they are frequently seen with white hair, but some can have brown. One distinction is that while a typical Bigfoot is seen as basically a bipedal ape, the Yeti tends to be more bear-like. What many fail to realize is that the stories of the Yeti predate most all other tellings of the Sasquatch. The original Himalayan pre-Buddhist lore tells of a large man-like beast that walked around the mountains and was originally named the Glacier Being. I know what you may be thinking. This list is about Russian cryptids, and the Himalayas are located in Asia. Before you think I've lost my mind, let me mention one thing. The Dyatlov Pass incident. Without going into the full story, it was a group of 7 men and 2 women who decided to go hiking with the purpose of reaching the mountain known as Ortorten. Sadly, none of them made it to their destination, but were found either frozen to death or in suspicious locations with body parts missing. Adding to this, their camp was trashed and the tent had been cut open from the inside. Many theories emerged, from aliens to government missile testing, but the last image the group took may have shown a light on another possibility. This is the image, and while many may assume it could have been one of the party members, others, including myself, feel they may have encountered the mysterious Yeti who didn't appreciate their intrusion on his territory. Brosno Dragon. In West Russia, in the Tver region, is a body of water known as Lake Brosno, and it is said to house a scary creature that has been talked about since before the 13th century. This being is simply known as the Brosno Dragon, and it is described as being at least 16 feet long, is iridescent in color, and looks oddly enough like a Chinese dragon. During the 13th century, reports state that the Tatar Mongol army was working their way to Novgorod in order to lay siege to the town. Before making it there, the army stopped to rest at Lake Brosno, and suddenly the dragon rose from the depths and began eating the soldiers' horses as well as the men. This terrified the troops, and they decided it best to leave the town alone. Dating before those stories, tales were told that a creature with a huge mouth would frequently devour a fisherman whole, as well as many reports of people seeing the creature break the surface of the water with a back they described as a sand mountain. There are even reports that somehow during World War II, the dragon decided to take a German airplane out of the sky. I'm not sure how that would be possible, but who am I to argue? In 1996, an article came out where the villagers that currently live near the lake are still terrified of the creature and fear that it may decide to attack their homes. Finally, in 2002, the Cosmopolitic Research Association decided to put the tales to rest and proceeded to use echo waves to scan the lake bottom. What they found was something they described as a blob the size of a railway car showing up on their radar, hovering above the lake bed. The crew dropped a small depth charge into the water to make the object move, and it slowly started to rise to the surface. Even though the water was clear, they could not see what was approaching them, and suddenly got an eerie feeling while floating in the water, which prompted them to leave. Shirele. We find this cryptid mainly in the folk tales of the Tatar people, who can be found all over Asia and Europe, but have a population of almost 6 million in Russia. I was going to include another cryptid in this video, but it appeared the Shirele and the Leshe are too similar to make a distinction. According to the legends, the Shirele is a human-like being that is completely covered in fur, has long bony fingers, and a singular horn growing from the center of its head. It can shapeshift into a human form, but in that state, its eyes glow. As a human, it has the peculiar trait that it wears its shoes backwards, as it seems unfamiliar with the proper way to wear clothes. Typically, it is seen as a forest spirit that could be considered a bit of a trickster if its pranks didn't normally end in its victim's death. Stories have been told that one can become friends with this being, and in turn, they will teach them magic, and in many cases offer protection. This doesn't last long, as the true nature behind the Shirele's activities leads to forms of trickery. This being enjoys leading people out into the forest, with the only goal being to get them lost. It is said if you come across one, it magically makes the person unable to find a way back home. Frequently, this creature likes to steal items from people just to cause confusion, such as an axe from someone out cutting lumber. One of the activities that this creature really enjoys seems quite funny, but then it takes a darker turn. It enjoys trapping its victims and tickling them, which most people enjoy a fun tickle, only the Shirele doesn't stop until the person is dead. There are quite a few interesting stories about this creature that I suggest you look into at your leisure. While the tales may seem far-fetched, as I always say, there normally is a nugget of truth in all the tall tales. Bonus story: Blackbird of Chernobyl. While researching the topic of this video, I kept coming across the supposed Blackbird of Chernobyl, which honestly had me quite intrigued. Chernobyl is located in Ukraine, which at the time was part of the Soviet Union and didn't resume its own control until 1991. As many of us are aware, Chernobyl was a nuclear power plant that was built in stages between 1977 to 1983. Within the facility, apartment-style buildings were set up for the workers as well as their families. On April 26, 1986, a catastrophic failure took place, causing the number 4 reactor to explode, due to the cooling water suddenly turning into steam during a scheduled safety test. This accident flooded the area of Pripyat with radiation that is still lingering to this day. Not long after these events, stories supposedly came out that workers as well as their family members frequently saw a strange black bird man flying around that had red eyes prior to the explosion. The stories go so far as saying that people who saw the creature experienced terrible nightmares as well as some strange phone calls. According to some reports, this being was seen before, during, and after the explosion, but then disappeared from sight within a few weeks. Now obviously my first thought was this being was probably some form of Mothman, as the description as well as visiting before a tragedy all fit. From what I was able to find out, it seems that this story is just that, a story. The reports only seem to be found in annals of the creepypasta realm. For those unfamiliar with creepypastas, they are basically modern, scary stories. While the Mothman has been seen before tragic events around the world, it seems it was busy elsewhere during April 26th. As always, if you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this, and if you have already, then thank you, I truly appreciate it. Also, it would be greatly appreciated if you give this video a thumbs up. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.